Hi, welcome to Story Time Booker. We're going to continue on today with book four, Sheriff in a Small Town. This is Home Again. And today's reading is A Foul Fiend. So don't need to look that up. I've got it up here. So let's start it now. I'll put that over here. Joe was doing his round on foot. He had had enough of the squad car for one day and needed to stretch his legs. Walking down one of the lesser traverse streets, he looked down the meager dwellings that constituted the poorer side of town. This area was where he had grown up. His father had died in the electric chair when he was 4. His mother had somehow eked out a life for them until he grew up and was able to take over his father's garage at the age of 18. His mother was in jail as an accomplice to the man who had sent his father to the chair on false charges, so he didn't come down the street very often. The memories were still too vivid for comfort. He sold the home to a young couple and thought no more about it. Approaching his old home, he heard an argument in progress. The argument was accompanied by the sound of breaking dinnerware and throwing pans. He adjusted his belt and marched to the door. Knocking loudly and getting no answer, he broke the door in with one swift and powerful kick. His first sight was a woman huddled on the floor and the man with his leg raised behind him, ready to kick her. Joe pulled his sidearm and barked an order. Get away from her and stand by the doorway. Called over the radio for backup and an ambulance. Till Talbot arrived, he couldn't do nothing for the woman since he had to keep the man under guard. The man had backed to the doorway and looked at the woman as if he'd rather continue his abuse. Bitch my wife, and that gives me the right to do anything I damn well please. Joe was shocked that any man would still believe that. The woman slowly raised her head. Her face was red in fury. Her voice was shrill in anger. I am not your wife. Court released me from you a year ago. You're not a part of my life anymore, so leave us alone. He spat at her. You thought I wouldn't find you two. Thought you'd just give me the slip. Well, I found you at last, and I aim to take you back home. She leapt to her feet and hid behind Joe. The man bolted from the doorway toward her with only Joe as her shield. His face was a mask of ungovernable rage. Joe struck out with the butt of his gun, striking the man across the face. The man was momentarily halted by the blow, but the blow only increased his anger. He pulled a knife and lunged. Joe dealt another blow at the man's head, sending him to the floor. As he rose, Joe lay with another strike. Joe's own fury was rising, and he slashed at the downed man, raining blow after blow. How long he would have continued is hard to say. Fortunately, Talbot arrived and halted Joe with an iron grip holding his wrist. Talbot arrived seconds before the ambulance and only just in time to prevent Joe from making a life-altering mistake. Talbot's tone was resonant and authoritarian, letting Joe knew he was in trouble. Walk her outside and I'll take this guy to the courthouse. Slowly walk back and cool off before you come back in. Joe escorted the woman to the ambulance and asked after her husband so he could be notified. She looked at Joe in terror, with terror-stricken eyes, wide and pained. Well, my husband left for work this morning. I was calling his office and he hadn't arrived. I think Judd did something to him. He said as much when he said I'd never see him again. Sheriff, you've got to make him say where Mike is, please. Joe promised, but wasn't sure what he could do to make this man talk. Hell, by the time he got to the courthouse, the guy would probably already be on the way to the state jail. He raced to the courthouse, praying he was in time. Joe arrived at the courthouse out of breath, but in time. The man was locked in the cell and cursing Talbot out. Talbot, this guy's done something to her husband. He's hidden them somewhere and probably hasn't tied up. We've got to make him tell where the guy's hidden. Judd began to laugh. How you think you're going to make me tell? What can you offer to make me? Let's see what we can find out first. Judd leaned against the wall, laughing a challenge. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Time is running out for him. Since Talbot had pulled Joe off of me, he figured on Talbot's trying to reason with him. Joe said nothing and opened the jail door. When the man attempted to bolt, Joe knocked him on the ground with one sledgehammer blow. Talbot had expected this and allowed Joe his shot. Since the man was trying to escape, it cleared Joe of any hint of prisoner abuse. Come on, help me strip him. Working swiftly, they stripped him down to his skivvies and laid him on the cot covered by a blanket. Bring the clothes up to the desk and began the thorough analysis of each item. From the kit, they brought magnifying glasses, bags, tweezers, a scalpel, and vials. For 10 precious minutes, they worked on cuffs, sleeves, shoes, pant legs. They worked swiftly, knowing that every moment counted. Gathering a good supply of samples, Talbot grabbed the man's clothing and tossed them into the cell. As he as he tossed in the pants, a leaf fell off from between the belt buckle and jeans. Talbot bent to pick it up, only to be grabbed by the throat by Judd. The sound of the clothes falling had woken him, and he had lay doggo, waiting for an opportunity to grab either sheriff or deputy. His large hands were about to throttle Talbot when Joe looked out at the sound of strangling. Seeing Talbot held by the throat, he pulled the closest item on the desk, a baseball. He threw it hard, and the man fell backwards, releasing Talbot. Talbot had the leaf in his hands still and walked to the desk. Thanks, Joe. Came out in a hoarse croak. The damp mold on the shoes was mixed with a fern type of leaf. The leaf that had dropped near the cell was a river birch. Pants were shown that they had been recently wet, which was reinforced by dampness still present in the cuffs. Talbot handed over the keys to the squad car. Head to the lake and check out round where he might still be alive. A scoff from the cell made them fear the worst. Joe ran out the door and dove into the squad car. From inside, they heard the siren roar into life and the sound of squealing tires. Joe headed rapidly to the lake, the accelerator pedal floored. He screeched to a halt, sending gravel flying and the squad car spinning around to face the road. He was hoping A, that the man was still alive, B, that he had remained calm and not stirred up the water, making it impossible to see him, and C, that he was close to the shoreline. Joe's pants had shown watermarks at the 2-foot level. That meant the man could be anywhere from close to the shoreline to 5 feet out. After 5 feet, the lake bed dropped significantly. Joe was getting frantic. He was desperate to find Mike and find him alive. He stopped looking at the water and looked at the shore. He had a good mental image of the man's footprint and started looking for that. Towards the left side of the lake, he spied the shoe print at the point where the water and shore met. Diving into the water, he swam in the direction the print had indicated. Driving towards the edge of the deep section, he didn't see anything of a body. All might have been lost if it hadn't been for a sudden shaft of light breaking through the trees that bordered the lake. Shaft shone into the deep end and outlined the man's body. Diving down, he brought the man up and onto the shallow. Sitting him upright, his head was just cleared the water. Working swiftly, though carefully, he opened the thick plastic. The plastic was held in place with a zip tie that was pulled taut. Unfolding the cutter from his leatherman, he snipped the tie. Pulling the bag off, he saw a flutter from the man's eyes. Somehow, the man was still alive. Joe pulled the weak and sodden man to the shore and began working on reviving him. A hand reached up and grasped Joe's arms. The man's voice was barely audible. My wife all right? Joe gave a sigh of relief that the man was coming around, also a sigh of regret regarding the news of the man's wife. Now she's in the hospital, the same one I'm taking you to. The man attempted to rise, but was too weak. Joe lifted him and carried him to the squad car. Once inside, he called Talbot, letting him know that he was taking Mike to the hospital. While he waited, Talbot called the hospital to check on the woman. As he talked to the doctor in charge of her case, his face tightened and he began to scribble on a pad. Hanging the phone, slowly, he sat motionless. Well, how's the bitch? Talbot rose and walked to the cell. You're going to need a good lawyer, and a damn good one. She was pregnant and lost her child. Well, that raises the counts against you, even if the husband survives. Talbot turned and kicked the baseball Joe had thrown. He was not about to pick it up anywhere near Judd where he could reach him. Joe's on the radio calling in. Joe to Talbot, come in. Yeah, Talbot here, go ahead. Found him, he's alive, but barely. He had a bag wrapped around his head and was under deep water. It was just enough air to last as long as it did. It kept us cool and was breathing as shallow as he could. we had been 5 minutes later, we'd have a corpse on our hands. Take him to the hospital. See you in a while. Over and out. Talbot worked on the charge sheet as the man cussed and kicked the cell in a frenzy of anger. In the back of Talbot's mind was the thought that this person had thought by killing the woman's husband, she'd be his once more. It wasn't love that compelled him, but the thought that she had escaped him. To him, she was a possession he could treat however he wanted to. As he waited for the state sheriff to come in and remove his prisoner, Talbot considered the man. Couldn't imagine what had induced the woman to stay with him in the beginning, much less marry him. Then he remembered former Sheriff Lester, who had a reputation in town. He'd be charming one moment and double the next. Looking again at the man throwing furniture around, he figured, as for divorcing him, it probably couldn't have come fast enough. In the hospital, Mandy Walker was in a drug stupor. She had been informed of the loss of her child and become hysterical. She didn't know if her husband was alive or dead. Her unborn child would never be in her arms, and she had a madman, ex-husband, who was terrorizing her and her spouse. It would drive anyone to madness. As she lay quietly, her mind in a fog, she saw the curtains part. A bed was being wheeled into her room, the figure covered and the head turned away. Nurse did a quick check of her vitals, patted her hand, and whispered, "Well, once you come around, you're going to be in good company." In the courthouse, Doug was transferred to the state penitentiary. He tried to break away, but the two troopers had been informed of the manner of a person they were to pick up and were ready. A blast of tear gas, a firm hold as the man was tossed face down on the floor, and with a knee in his back, his arms brought back and cuffed, his legs cuffed as well, and both tied together so that he was trussed up like a Sunday chicken. Sheriff Newman took the paperwork, and then he, Sheriffs Montoya, Talbot, and Deputy Steckler all carried the struggling criminal to the wagon. Sheriffs have an unwritten rule. If you're calm and give no trouble, they'll treat you with consideration. Make a fuss, try and fight, spit and bite, and the gloves are off, and your entry into the vehicle may be heralded with a few bumps and bruises. Well, all unintentional, of course. As Minnie's mind cleared, she looked over to see who her roommate was. The head facing away left little to guide her, though she felt the head did look familiar. An arm and hand slid out from the sheet. Now, there was no mistaking those hands. She'd marveled every day they had been together how a man so slender and had hands so large. Fighting her sluggishness, she tried to rise and go to her husband. The sight of him braced her, and she climbed over the rails. The sound of her grunting efforts roused Mike from his lethargy. He turned towards her, smiling. The smile turned to one of fright as he saw her balanced on the edge of the rail and tumble onto the floor. He frantically pressed the nurse call button and then rolled over and worked to climb out of his own bed. When the nurse arrived, husband and wife were on the floor embracing. Several aides were called to help lift the couple and place them back in bed. One rail each were lowered and the beds pushed close together, and then the brakes triple checked to ensure the beds would stay put. The couple fell into a deep, healing sleep in each other's arms. All right, that's it for today. The next one is a couple of days away. So we'll be reading that on Friday because today is Tuesday, I think. So that's it. I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I hope you'll be here for the next chapter. And I guess that's all. So be good to yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again on Friday. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.